Hello everyone, welcome to Thinking About. I'm Omar and I'm joined by Nancy, and we're both students at the Charter School North Dulwich. And this evening we're joined by Penny and Radu from Fuse Architects, who are going to tell us about sustainable housing. Fuse Architects are committed to tackling the climate emergency by designing and delivering affordable net zero carbon homes that are significantly addressing fuel poverty.
Today's talk will explain what they mean by net zero carbon, the need for net zero carbon housing, tackling fuel poverty with new technology, the energy hierarchy, net zero carbon design technology, and what that actually looks like in our homes, as well as looking at the challenges and costs involved in all of this. Penny and Radu are here to tell us more. Welcome to both of you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Radu. I'm an architect with Fuse Architects. Before we start, I think we should discuss a bit about sustainability and as a general thing. As I'm sure you very well know, sustainability is could be defined as a balance between economic growth, environmental care, and social well-being. These three key items should be considered together at all times when we speak of sustainability. Now, sustainability in the built environment means using recyclable and renewable materials with a target of minimizing energy consumption and waste production. The main goal would be to reduce the building's impact on our environment. In construction, you could look at it in two stages, let's say. An initial stage which would be the sustainable design, when you're using sustainable materials and always thinking of future use energy consumption. And the second part would be the actual life of the building. With sustainable design, you aim for sustainable energy consumption and reduction of carbon emissions to zero. In the UK, there are already laws and targets to be hit by 2030 and 2050 to bring down the carbon emissions to zero. RIBA, which is the Royal Institute of British Architects, is our main professional membership body that we as architects and as an architectural practice are part of, has also set a target for 2030 that all new and retrofit buildings should deliver net zero whole life carbon. Next, Penny will take you through our company's approach on net zero carbon housing.
Good evening, good afternoon. I'm Penny. I'm one of the equity partners at Fuse Architects. So our approach to net zero carbon has been driven out really out of fuel poverty and looking at tenants' fuel bills in affordable housing. So as we all know, soaring energy bills are creating a sort of a heat or eat crisis for lots of people. So net zero carbon or low energy homes give an immediate benefit, and we are seeing tenants in our net zero carbon homes in Greenwich are paying much lower fuel bills as a result of the technology that's been integrated into their homes. Next slide, please. So as Radu has just alluded to, the UK has set in law a target to bring greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2050. To help to achieve this, the Future Homes Building Standard will ensure that new homes built from 2025 produce 75 to 80% less carbon emissions than were delivered under the old building regulations. So this will mean a gas boiler ban in new homes from 2025. This may alter actually with government legislation, but we are seeing it between 2025 and 2030. So 80% of the homes that people will inhabit at the moment are already built, and by 2050 are already built. So we also need to look at retrofitting housing, social housing and private housing. You probably all live in houses that are not necessarily well insulated, where your fuel bills are escalating. I'm sure your parents are mentioning this to you. We are therefore looking also at the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. This has just been set up to improve energy performance in existing rented stock only. This doesn't apply to the private sector. And there is funding coming out of over 3.8 billion pounds over a 10-year period. So what is net zero carbon? It is basically when the amount of carbon dioxide emissions released in a building on an annual basis is either zero or negative. So now I'm just going to run through a little bit about how we've approached this. So there is this basically an energy hierarchy that is used in this approach. So the first section is to be lean, so use less energy. And this is often known as the fabric first approach. So basically you improve the building fabric or the building materials to get better U values. We'll talk about U values in a minute. That's the technical term in terms of air loss. So this reduces air leakage and it controls the air changes. And it basically, we'd also be looking at reducing the amount of energy using on lighting, and also using passive techniques so that you're orientating towards the sun to get heat. The second section is be clean and supply energy efficiently. So use efficient heating and hot water technology like air source or ground source heat pumps. Use solar water heaters and use low energy lighting. I think all of us have seen new LED lighting coming in over the last few years. The other element is to be green, so to use renewable technology. So these are things like wind turbines that help create cleaner energy and reduce basically emissions. And one last resort is to offset. And you've probably heard about this because there is an awful lot in the news about offsetting at the moment. As you can see there on the slide, we've talked about that as the last resort option, because offsetting means that basically you compensate for any carbon that you are emitting with a carbon offset payment, or sometimes people plant trees, or they make a payment or an endeavour elsewhere to offset the amount of carbon that they've used. And then finally, it's about being seen, and this has recently been added to the energy hierarchy. And this is about training and ongoing support for residents and what we call post-occupancy monitoring. So going back into people and saying, how is this working? Is your net zero carbon house efficient? Are your bills lower? And then sharing those findings. So that's what's known as the energy hierarchy. So new homes, let's just talk about what we've been doing. So this is what we were talking about in terms of the U values. So there's the notional U values, and then there's the target U values. And this is basically what we'd want to achieve to get net zero carbon. And you can see here a fairly complicated detailed drawing of a typical roof that shows the build-up that we need to make sure, as I was talking about before, that we don't have air permeability, and therefore we are reducing the amount of escaped air and therefore achieving this net zero carbon. And here's a couple of very fancy diagrams as well, just showing you the technology. So here we've got the first one, we've got air or ground source heat pumps, and you're seeing how the cold air it circulates through the house and how the hot air does as well. And then here beside you, you've got the mechanical heat ventilation recovery system, which basically is taking cold air in, making it warm, and then if it is too warm, taking the warm air out. So in very simple terms, you're making sure that the house is insulated, but you then have to obviously circulate the air within it. The other technology used are photovoltaic roof panels, which I'm sure you've seen because there's plenty around in Southwark. And they are, as you can see here on one of our sites, put on the roof to basically capture solar energy. And there's a photovoltaic diagram there to show you a few solar panels and how they feed into the house. So altogether, you can see all the different technology that come together to make the net zero carbon house. You've got the external source heat pump or ground source. You've got that the mechanical heat ventilation that we talked about. You've got the hot water. You've got the PV converter, which is converting from the photovoltaic panels on the roof. And then you've got the heating distribution. What you tend to find in net zero carbon houses is that you don't have peaks and troughs of heat. They tend to be always at about 19 degrees. And that takes a little bit of getting used to. Something that I haven't mentioned as well is the triple glazed windows. Sorry, Radu. So that also is part of the fabric approach. So what we've assembled here is just a few examples of some of the homes we've delivered for net zero carbon. So these are in the London Borough of Greenwich. They're Greenwich builds, and many of them have wheelchair adapted homes as well. So this is the Underwood. It was 7 houses with one 3-bed wheelchair adapted house. And you can see here it's under construction. And these are what's known as SIPS panels, which is a structured insulated panel made out of timber. And again, you can see here we've got triple glazed windows, air source heat pumps, mechanical ventilation, and the photovoltaics on the roof. And there it is finished. And look, the cat came along all without any enticement. So that's a real picture of a finished product. As I said, 7 houses and 1 wheelchair over in Greenwich. And we've won quite a few awards for this, actually. So that's always nice as architects. Next slide. A bit of the kit. So inside, you can see what the kit looks like. So this is what makes a net zero carbon house. And outside, you can see the air source heat pump is in the rear garden. And you also note the bird box on the back wall as well. You can see there the photovoltaics on the roof. So that's the Underwood. Barnfield is the first flattered scheme we're doing at net zero carbon. And you can easily see there on the roof the photovoltaic panels. This is 14 flats and there's some communal space at ground floor as well. And again, we're looking at basically an integration of all this technology, including the windows. This will have to have a central combined air source heat pump and central mechanical heat ventilation because it's running to different flats. Additional costs, there are additional costs because this technology is at the moment more expensive. We can see that in the future that may get better as more and more people embrace this technology. But we're looking at the moment between 10 and 12% higher capital cost than traditional. But obviously fuel bills will be as low as 90% less than a comparable traditional house. So obviously that has its benefits. Passive house, we just put this in just to mention, is a concept for building low energy houses. And this is the leading building standard to achieve it. We do some passive house design, and it basically has to have certain passive house principles, which are similar to net zero carbon, but they don't have to be. So a passive house doesn't necessarily have to be net zero carbon. With passive house, you have superior windows, mechanical heat ventilation, quality insurance, and no thermal bridging as mentioned here. Thank you. That is us. So any questions, put your hand up, and I know that Nancy and Omar are going to fire away.
Yeah, if you've got any questions, just put them in the Q&A section. If not, we can supplement with our own, but just take a look. So this is one of my questions, but how much of architecture at the moment is sustainable and green? So if you looked at London, how much of a percentage would be green or sustainable housing?
That's a tricky one, Omar. I don't know. What would you say, Radu?
I don't know, not as much as it should be at the moment, I think. Yeah, way less than expected.
I think with net zero carbon, you're seeing a lot of providers moving forward using this, because they can see that gas boilers will be out, basically phased out. So therefore, when we're working for housing associations, and I don't know if you're aware of what a housing association is, but it's a body that then rents houses back to people. They are building their houses in perpetuity, so they want those to be in existence forever. So they want also people to be able to afford to live in them. And so the net zero carbon is offering an opportunity to achieve that, so that people don't have big fuel bills. So I think that impetus is driving quite a lot of housing associations to look at net zero carbon, plus obviously the law changing, which helps. But certainly, from my point of view, I live in a terraced house in Southwark. It's not something that we can afford to look at the moment, if that makes sense. I know some friends have got photovoltaics on the roofs, and they're looking at maybe increasing their insulation, but it's not something that we're embracing, as Radu says, as quickly as maybe we should be.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, I think, it will be to retrofit the existing buildings, because the costs are great, and it is complicated to add insulation. I think things will be done step by step, like changing the roof, adding more insulation to the roof, changing the windows, but and step by step with insulation, and then with the mechanical services as well.
Looking at how you get into architecture, is it stupid to think that you have to have certain A levels like maths and art to get into architecture, or is it just a myth?
No, it's not stupid. It's not stupid at all. It will definitely help to have to be good in maths and science, and it's not so much art related as you may think.
Yeah, certainly when we're recruiting architects, and I'm personally an architect, Radu is, we find that the combination of having a maths background and an artistic background works very well, because there is a little bit of everything in there, as Radu said. So, the stages of architecture, from planning through to build, which is the technical side, demand both set skills, which is quite challenging, actually. And if you think about it as a profession, it's probably unusual that you need both of those skills. But certainly from our experience, both skills make for better architects.
Absolutely, yeah. I've also studied maths and science. Yeah.
That's good too. That's good too.
You were talking, obviously there are, certain materials that you need for sustainable housing and some that don't necessarily work. So I just wanted to know if there was any room for creativity, or was it quite, the sustainable houses look very similar, or is there room to create, have artistic license, so to say, for sustainable housing?
No, absolutely. There's a lot of room to explore any type of designs or materials. It's what the aim is here is more to do with energy consumption, and to be to have an insulated building, thermally and airtight, and I think these are the most important ones, and have an energy consumption, a sustainable energy consumption. And then you can definitely look at any type of shape or any type of material to clad the building in the end. So there's I don't see any restrictions on this side now.
So Joshua's asked, with so many Victorian terraced houses in Southwark, are there plans to include NZC elements in planning permission rules?
There should be.
There should be now, if we're talking about new homes or retrofit, because that's for the existing. It's hard to imagine that they'll be able to manage to get down to net zero carbon, but definitely a lot of improvement can be added to the existing houses. Yeah. But to bring them to net zero, it's would be really difficult to do to an existing house.
Yeah, as I mentioned a minute ago, the decarbonisation fund has released these billions of pounds to do a lot of this on social housing.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is we're a small player in that, but we're going around and measuring air tightness, etc., and then proposing maybe quite simple things like extra insulation on the roof, new windows, maybe cladding on the outside. So it will happen because I think it has to, because of the climate emergency.
Absolutely, and as we've said, by 2050, still 80% of all the homes will be already built to previous building regulations. So yeah, definitely it's a very important thing to consider, the existing built environment.
Cool. We've got another question. This one's about work experience, and they were asking whether Fuse Architects offer work experience for year 12.
We do. Yeah, we do. I think we've got someone coming. I can't remember now, but yeah, every year we take somebody from the charter school. We've had somebody last year, but maybe this year. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think if you just drop them an email, it's definitely available. So we've got another one. So you're talking about photovoltaics. Was that something that you use to supplement energy, or was it something that sustainable is 100% dependent on? I mean, that'd be quite difficult because they're quite inconsistent, but does that take the onus away from carbon, your carbon footprint?
Yeah, the photovoltaics supplement it. They're part of the whole house approach to net zero carbon.
We've got one more in the Q&A section, and it's are sustainable / net zero homes more expensive to buy than normal terraced housing, I would guess?
Yeah, they're certainly more expensive to produce, as I said, between 10 and 15% more expensive to build. It's interesting that not an awful lot of net zero carbon homes are available privately, as far as I know. I know one of them actually has just got planning permission in my road which is not very far from the charter school, and that'd be interesting to see, because that's a net zero carbon home, private. But I'm not aware of that many private. We do a lot of social housing there, so just forgive me. I'm not that aware. Are you Radu, aware of a lot? It's without a doubt a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
We're talking to residents in Greenwich that are looking at their fuel bills are on average about £40 a month. Well, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The difference is mind-blowing.
I've got a first house in Suffolk, and my fuel bills are absolutely eye-watering. So yeah, £40 a month is just amazing. So I think we've all got to move to it. It's about how much we do, as Radu was saying. You won't get full net zero carbon on existing stock, or it'd be very hard to. But we've all got to embrace it.
But step by step, any improvement will help a lot. Yeah.
Does the focus on sustainability change the skill set required with a firm of architects?
Sorry?
Does the focus on sustainability change the skill set required to be in a firm of architects?
I wouldn't say so. No, I don't think so. It shouldn't. It shouldn't.
I think we're all learning all the time because technology is changing. It's
Absolutely.
all, you know, every sort of month brings new stuff to the sort of you know, the practice. So I think as long as you've got the right energy and that you want to learn and you want to sort of improve the built environment, you don't need that sort of that experience. But I think it's very exciting. I think, you know, coming into this sort of this profession now is a very exciting time because we are all able to change things, which, you know, is, I think, really exciting. Make a difference to the climate.
You were talking about social housing and the, you know, redoing social housing. Obviously they've been there for a long time. So is the emphasis on redoing the house or actually just rebuilding social housing in a sustainable way?
I think both, really. Our experience in Greenwich is new build, as I've just shown you some of those examples. But we are also looking at this decarbonisation fund where we go and retrofit existing homes where people are experiencing high fuel bills, some black mould and that sort of stuff, you know, as a result of poor building and you know, leaks and bad heating systems. So I think a bit of both, really. The government did bring in this decarbonisation fund, £3.8 billion. That's just about to be announced. So it'd be interesting to see what effect that has. And then, obviously, the new build, as I said, there is this impetus to deliver new build because of the changing technology and really the fuel poverty. You know, if you imagine that if someone can't pay their fuel bills, they're not going to be paying their rent either, are they? So, you know, it is a real crisis that we're facing. So that's, you know, one of the main sort of catalysts for net zero carbon in social housing, fuel poverty.
So someone's asked, do you think architects currentally have sufficient training in modern methods of construction, such as the timber buildings you showed?
That's good, isn't it? Modern methods of construction, I like that.
No, I don't think they do. But yeah, as Penny said, we're constantly learning and yeah, we're getting there, definitely. We need to.
If you're looking to retrofit a block of flats, what are the top 5 changes you'd make? Helen's asked.
Well, the first would be the windows, I think. The easiest and most straightforward thing to do. Then I'd say the heating, the central heating. So get rid of the gas boilers and introduce electric heating. And yeah, as much as possible to the building fabric to strip it down and have only use non-combustible materials and also improve the thermal properties of the insulation to give it a better insulation. Yeah.
Maybe some photovoltaics on the roof as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think having houses with greener energy will reduce our standards of living energy-wise? For example, photovoltaics can't generate as much electricity as fossil fuels.
Yeah, I think we'll all have to really look at the way we live, to be honest. It was interesting to see today that they're looking at a sort of a really pared back way of heating swimming pools, for instance. I think we are constantly going to have to look at the way we live, the amount of energy we use, and living slightly differently.
So I think we've got one more, and it's about the decarbonisation fund and who can access it, and will that encourage private homeowners to make a change?
Well, I think it's quite sad, really, because the government did have the Green Deal, which was accessible for private homeowners, but that all collapsed under Boris Johnson. So that got parked. And at the moment, the decarbonisation fund is just for social rented homes and social landlord. So what I'm hoping, without being too political, is that we have a change and we have a green agenda, because that's exactly what we need for private homes. But obviously that's not me being political.
So that was our last question for today. Penny and Radu, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us this evening and for answering all the questions. Audience, thank you for coming and for asking such insightful questions. Next week, the SSLP will be thinking about sustainable careers. We hope you'll join us then. Goodbye.